Welcome to Integrate Yourself, everybody. I'm your host, Allison Pillow, and you can find me at finallythrivingbook.com and pureenergypdx.com. Today, I'm here with a very special guest, Mike Bledsoe. He's been in the coaching game for over 15 years. He's ran CrossFit gyms, created podcasts in the last 10 years, and coached health and fitness experts on how to grow their businesses by systemizing and automating things in their businesses, leaving them with the ability to lead their clients by example and taking good care of themselves. You can find him on Instagram at Mike underscore Bledsoe, and also find him at thestrongcoach.com and thebledshow.com. Welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited that you're on my show today because we're going to talk about some really exciting topics and some things that I think is going to really help people in this day and time as we're going through some more stressful times, in our current environment and economy and those kinds of things. So if I would love it if you would start off by sharing a little bit more about yourself and how you got to be what you're doing now, because you're doing something very different than what you started with. So I'd love to hear about that, a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it is interesting because I am quite the entrepreneur now. Many businesses behind me, got a few going right now, and now I teach it. And it's something that I never wanted to do. I'm the reluctant entrepreneur. It's it's so interesting because I saw my dad run his own business. I didn't want to do that, so I went in the Navy, and then I was in the Navy and realized, well, I also don't like being told what to do. So, but all the things I saw my dad struggle with was like the marketing and the finances. Those are the two things that I just never really wanted to deal with. And I figured if I was getting a paycheck somewhere, then I wouldn't have to deal with it. But, having been homeschooled and then joined the Navy, I basically went from this place of ultimate freedom to an incredible amount of structure in this institution. And I was like, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. I didn't know that my life was going to be dictated so heavily. And that was really the Navy was my last time with, I'll call it corporate America. It's just about as corporate as you can get. And so I went to school. I went to business school first, and then I withdrew from the accounting class because I was going to fail it. And I go, oh, I'm not cut out for business. And I found the exercise science department. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I get a degree in exercise science. This is right up my alley. This is the stuff I study on my own all the time anyway. And that degree program was enjoyable and did well there. And before I could get out of that program, I had discovered CrossFit. And the first time I saw it, I thought it was dumb. And then 6 months later, I tried it because I was bored. And it was a lot of fun. And I go, wow, this is so much fun. People are going to love this. There's got to be a CrossFit nearby. And I was a weightlifter. So I'd been doing Olympic weightlifting at that point. And I saw what was happening in CrossFit with weightlifting in 2007. It was atrocious. I go, oh, I can help these people, these terrible, terrible people. And And I was like, I'm going to find the CrossFit gym in town, and I'm going to go volunteer to coach there. That's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to take my skills. And there was not a single gym in all of Tennessee. So I spent a couple weeks kind of like kicking rocks and, trying to figure out how I could find someone who's got a gym. Maybe I should move. And then it occurred to me, I was talking to a buddy, and he goes, well, why don't we just open one up? And, started off. We worked underneath his carport for a few months, put $3,000 on a credit card for a minimum amount of equipment, started getting cold. We knew the winter was coming. So I started looking for a place to rent. I was like, okay, I'll charge people. I was doing a little bit of personal training at the rec center at the university. So well, I could train people. I could charge them something. We could do I'll treat it like a club. I don't really want to run a business. I just, you know, whatever. And, fast forward a year after opening the gym is I'm in grad school. I'm having a hard time keeping my grades up because the gym is taking up so much of my time, and my gym is suffering because I'm not really, able to put all my attention into it because I'm in grad school. And I came to a pivotal moment where I go, oh, I either need to drop out of grad school or I need to shut down the gym. One of the two. I go, you know what? Grad school will always be there. If I shut this gym down, it's going to come to a screeching halt. And trying to get something like this started again is going to be very difficult. So I said, you know what? I'm going to learn about business. Screw it. I'll do it. And yeah, I had to live in my gym for a while. I hit a rock bottom where I was living in my gym. I didn't have any money. There was no vacations. There was no leaving town. There was none of that. And yeah, I really didn't know what to do, but I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. But I started learning business through an online course, which me and my buddy stole, and then started implementing those things, and things started coming together. And fast forward, so that was in '09 is when I really started taking business serious. And I would say it was like 2009, 2010, I started to identify as an entrepreneur. I didn't know what it was before that. And by the time I got to, I'd say to 2013, 2014, I was excited to be an entrepreneur. And that was my primary identity that I had. I went from the identity of being a gym owner, coach, CrossFitter, weightlifter. And then I was most proud to be an entrepreneur. And so it was 2014 is when I started teaching other people how to do it, because I had spent 5 years, building out gyms and online coaching businesses, and I'd figured a few things out. So yeah, that's kind of the short story of like how I went from this, just I mean, pretty typical. I mean, I was in a very typical situation. Get out of the military, open a CrossFit gym. I mean, walk into a CrossFit gym, there's a 50% chance a guy got out of the military and started that thing.
Yeah, that's true. So true. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah, that's incredible. And so then, what happened after that? Did you decided to focus more on the business, teaching people how to run their own businesses and become entrepreneurs themselves once you got comfortable with that within you?
Yeah, I mean, the way it happened was when I opened my gym in 2007, between 2007 and 2012, I
Mhm.
had several failed additional businesses in there. So I had this entrepreneurial thing going on where I was like, oh, I see like an opportunity, or I see a problem that I can solve. And I invested money and time and energy into some other businesses which failed. So it's not, I like to paint the picture that like everything I did was a win.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would say half the businesses I've started are still running. And I know when to quit real early too. Like I don't
Mhm.
have to be in a business very long. It's like 3 or 4 months. I can sniff it out and go, okay, there's something here, or maybe there's not something here, and I need to go back to the drawing board. But in 2012, I started podcasting, and in 2012, podcasting was almost nobody was doing it, not in the health and fitness space. Definitely nobody was doing it as a strength and conditioning professional. And there wasn't anything for the CrossFit market, which was exploding. The trend of CrossFit was just 2012 was exploding. And then you had YouTube. You had this perfect storm. Like YouTube had just gotten to this point where it was pretty easy to upload that. Podcast became a thing. CrossFit was trending. And I was able to harness all these things in this one container, which was Barbell Shrugged, which was a podcast. And we had like the highest quality video podcast that I had even known of up to that point. Like we did do something extraordinary. And I ran that show for a year and a half before I figured out how to make money from it.
Mm.
I talked to sponsors. I was unhappy with the type of relationship they wanted to have. Um, I tried to sell some online products. It was very sparse. Um, and then I go to a marketing conference in 2013, and that's where I learned oh, I need to tap into my existing audience and ask them what it is that they want. And I really didn't even have to ask them too much because once I started getting into like who is my audience, the solution was pretty obvious. But I still surveyed them to find out. They came back, and then I went from struggling to make $1,000 a month from a podcast that had tens of thousands of listeners to making 30,000, 40,000, fifty thousand
Wow.
dollars a month, and then it went up from there. But it was a pretty quick turnaround from learning a few simple strategies and business models to like, oh, and at that point, I had already figured out the business model and the strategies for the gym business. And then I'd figured it out for the online business, and then which was actually very similar. Um, and then I was getting on the phone a lot. Gym owners were calling me all the time. I was on the phone for hours every week
Oh,
giving
wow.
free advice to
Yeah.
other gym owners that were in neighboring towns. They're like, "How are you doing it? Like, it looks like you're successful." And so I said, "Oh, I should probably start podcasting about business too." So I started another show to talk about the business side and started coaching gym owners from there. So that's really where it started. Wasn't because necessarily because I was like, "Oh, I want to be a business coach now." It was more of people are just asking me business questions, so I might as well give it away. Like instead of me being on the phone for hours a week, I can just do an hour or two on a podcast, give it to everybody, and then, within a few months, we figured out, what we could sell that audience as well.
Wow,
And
that's
that turned into
incredible.
business coaching. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, it sounded like it happened really organically for you. That's and and so many people, this would include myself, we just forget to ask, right? We just forget to ask and the right questions and get to know really what the audience wants that we're serving. Yeah, which I
Yeah.
think is so important.
Yeah, yeah, man, I think that's the hardest thing for coaches is the most of us start like my first coaching business was hard, it was
Yeah.
I started it because I wanted to coach a thing I was passionate about, and it was it made it difficult because there wasn't very many people like me. And so I find a lot of coaches do that. They're like, "Oh, I'm passionate about the results that I got, and I don't want to like other people to have the results that I got." And I find that that frame, it can work. You might get lucky, but it doesn't always work. You're right. Like we have to listen to the people who are resonating with us, when we speak, like who are the people that we're attracting and what is it they actually want. And then also like, are we speaking about things that are like right now, it's very difficult to differentiate yourself in the market. If you
Mm.
go out there and like, oh, I help people lose weight. It's like, okay, great. You and about 100,000 other coaches helping people lose weight. So, like a good example of this I'm witnessing right now is like this knee pain movement.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Tell me more. I haven't
Like,
seen that
um,
as much.
yeah. So if anyone's wondering like how to
Oh, you mean like knees over toes and that kind of thing?
exactly,
Yes, yes.
exactly. So knees over toes guy crushed it.
Oh
And
god, yeah, he's doing amazing. And I love his stuff. I use it myself too. I mean, it
me
works,
too.
I mean, it's
Me too.
amazing. I
Yeah,
can't
I've
and I
actually
think
had
about it,
people
I'm like, how did I not think of that myself, because once it you bring it to light, you're like, "Oh, that's so obvious, but how did we not see that before?" Yeah.
it's because most coaches, this is what the ones that are making the least amount of money are usually they're of the opinion that they can help everyone. And so
Oh, right.
they look at it's like they feel bad, or it's really comes from a place of scarcity of like, if I focus in on one specific thing, then I'm not going to be able to get all these other people. And I think
Yeah.
that people may look at someone like Paul Check and they're like,
Mhm.
well, he kind of does everything. I'm like, yeah, he's 60. He's been doing this shit for 30
Long
plus
time.
years.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, there's plenty of podcasts where you can go listen to him talk about how he's living out of his car not that long ago. It's not like he was been successful the whole time,
Right.
but he's had it hard, and so like because he didn't do that, and
Yeah.
if you're a Paul Check, you're probably not listening to us anyway. But I would much rather be, that knees over toes guy. And the formula that he hit that anybody can take. This is the formula that I've gotten from him is one is demographic information, right? The
Yeah.
demographics of his audience is 35 to 50-year-old dudes and so that's the demo.
We
Uh,
wanna jump high, right?
that's their values. So
Yeah.
the value graphics are, I want to be more athletic. Likely, I used to be an athlete. Now my knees hurt and I can't do shit. Right. Someone invites me to go play a game of soccer. I used to play soccer and like all through high school. And I'm like, I kind of don't want to go play. And they're like, why do you want to go play? Because I'll get hurt. And that's what happens when you're 40. And I'm
Yeah.
40 now. And so, yeah, the demographic is, men 35 to 50 probably is probably the people who are attracted. Former athletes. So he and he is talking to himself in a lot of ways. And but then also he pinpoints the major pain point,
Mm.
your knees. He doesn't talk
That's a
about
big
back
one.
pain. He
Yeah.
doesn't talk about body aches. He doesn't talk about, anything general. He doesn't talk about injury prevention. He talks about knee pain. And so if you can, that's the formula is what is it? Uh, what's the demo? So age, gender, that kind of thing. What do they value? And what's their biggest pain point?
Mm.
And if you can package that up, then you get knees over toes guy. And it seems like, well, he just came out of nowhere and da da da. But I mean, he basically nailed down the niche. Like I know a lot of people, they're hitting the niche of moms or dads. But
Right.
I'm like, yeah, but what problem? What is we got to figure out what group of dads. We'll talk about dads. We need to figure out what group, the type of dads you're attracting. What do they value? And out of that smaller group, what is their biggest pain? Okay, now if we can talk about dads who, whatever, I don't even, um, want to be able to play with their kids without their back hurting or throwing out their shoulder, then okay, now we're working on it. We have a specific thing we're working on, and yeah, so that's just a little nugget like that I've been circling just because I see most coaches that's the hardest thing is nailing down their ideal client.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really simple formula that anybody can use. I love that, and it really makes it gives it structure, and then you can play within that. I think what I was missing for some time was I was like, "Where's the passion? I want, I need that, like, to be able to help people." Um, but the structure needs to be there first, and you need to have a direction first in order to get to those people that you really want to help. And then the creativity comes within that structure, but you have to create the structure first, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like anyone who's been training or eating well for as long as we have. So I've been focused on movement and nutrition for 25 years. I can walk into the gym, I can do a little bit of movement. It's like check in with my body, and then I create a workout on the spot. Like it's intuitive training, right?
Hmm.
Um, and then I have to put some structure in here and there. I guess I got like a macro idea of what I'm doing and how I'm training, and doing little things to make sure I'm not leaving something out just because I don't like doing it. And the same thing with food. It's like I could not tell you how many calories I'm eating, but there was a time where I knew exactly how many calories, how many protein, fat, carbs. I spent years doing super structured routines, never deviated. And because of that background, that allows me to be very intuitive now. I have a
Hmm.
huge library of things to pull from. And because I followed someone else's structure, I was able to learn things that I would not have learned on my own. And so I think that uh, a lot of coaches almost put their clients in this intuitive state too early.
Yes, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
like, well, you just want to feel your way. I'm like, that's you. You need to feel your way. Your client needs structure. And a coach who's really used to flow, having them create structure for somebody else can be very difficult.
Yes. Yes,
So
for
you're
sure.
right. Like the structure is what allows the flow to occur. There's I did a podcast with a buddy of mine. We did a two-part series. We did one on matter and one on pattern. So
Oh.
matter comes from the root word like maternal,
Mm.
and matter is all that is, right? Like
Yeah.
matter is what makes up this bottle in my hand, right?
Right.
Me up. And then pattern comes from paternal, and it's the
Oh.
pattern. And so, they talk about, everything is both a particle and a wave at the same time. Well, the feminine is the all that is, and then
Yeah.
the masculine is the pattern that makes it a specific thing. It gives it the direction, it gives it the structure. And so
Yeah.
that's something to think about for people, is like your library of food or your library of movement is the matter, and then the pattern is what most people are usually missing both, and they need to
Yes.
get both.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, yeah, everybody, if you haven't started with that structure, it's essential, I believe, and that's why I always say yes, the fitness and the nutrition is always essential to get you grounded, and then within that, you can then explore way more, but you
Yeah,
gotta do
because
that first. Yeah.
you're actually already in another pattern.
Mhm. Right, right. You
Yeah,
just haven't noticed it, right?
yeah,
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 yeah. It's very
yeah,
subtle. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Oh my god, I love that. I love that, that analogy, and it makes so much sense when I think about that because, yeah, I love that so much. It's I'm gonna keep that as an example. Because
Perfect.
yeah, you don't think about the masculine as being the pattern, but it is. It
Yeah,
is what creates that kind of because it's like, you do your daily practice, which creates the matter eventually, right? Because you're doing
yeah,
that on a regular basis. Yeah. And you're consistent with it.
absolutely.
I wanted to get into too, because this is a big thing that's been happening lately. Like we're reframing hard work, as you put it. And like the old paradigm, in my opinion, was like really work hard, will your way through it. But I feel like that's not working as well for people anymore. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, we can go right back to I got several thoughts about it. We can just use the matter and pattern as a good segue. And sorry, what was the question again? I got all
No
my
worries.
my
It was
nootropics
about
wore off.
reframing hard work, and what are your thoughts around that? Because I
Mm,
felt like,
yeah,
we've been in such a mode of like work harder, to get, to create what you want to create, but there's also an aspect of that that's more in the being aspect. So bringing the being and the doing together more so instead of doing it all from the, going from the doing aspect only. So
yeah.
that, yeah,
Well, yeah, going back to like say the pattern, and so like if you're repeating the same pattern over time, it say it's a movement pattern, it's gonna result in an overuse injury. And
yeah,
so I think what happens for a lot of people, they're in these patterns for work that just it starts feeling harder and harder and harder because they've been in the same exact pattern, and other things are getting neglected, and like the whole system is just starting to fall apart. And so they're just doing the same thing over and over again to try and like because it worked before, but it's not working anymore. And that person needs to break out of that pattern and go into more flow. And so for the people who are business owners, this applies much more frequently than it will apply for someone who's working a job. So if you own your own business, then you need to be going through periods of time where it's really structured, followed by periods of time where there's a lot of flow. Structure, flow, structure, flow. Are you familiar with spiral dynamics?
I am familiar with that, but I don't recall what it's
Yeah.
about.
So
Yeah.
so the as people go through their stages of development of consciousness, they
Mhm.
basically alternate between a more masculine view and a feminine view. So the same thing happens in business. As your business grows, it's going through these stages of development. And so you got to go from highly structured, it's usually how it starts, to once that pattern is set in place, it's like, okay, I'm going to go more into the flow, disrupt the structure a little bit, and then I'm going to get rid of the stuff that doesn't work, and I'm going to bring the stuff in that does work, and we're going to restructure. And making that transition can be hard. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of times people feel like something needs to change, but they don't know what it is yet. And I find that you got to like let go of some of this stuff first. So to continue to grow, and going from structure to flow, if you've never done it, can feel wrong. It can feel lazy. It can
Mhm.
feel like, "Ah, I'm not working as hard." And um, so what I would say is like the hard work piece that's dangerous, which is what I used to be in, is that I would work hard because I never felt like I was a good man unless I was working hard. Because
Mm.
I would ride down the street with my dad working construction. You know, we were in the F-150, had the rack on top of the truck with ladders on it and a toolbox. Like we were the work truck you saw driving around town. You know, as early as 12, 13 years old, going out roofing houses, just working all the way through the summer in Tennessee where it's hot. And we worked hard. And that was like, that was I got my work ethic from my dad. Like
Mm.
I'm really grateful for it because there are some lazy people out there. And but we would be driving by and somebody would be begging for change on the side of the road, which is way more prominent now than it used to be. And he would just say, "Hey, they're being lazy," you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so he the language that he had that I learned from him was basically like, you don't want be anybody but lazy for one. And then if you want to be a good man, you're going to work hard. So that that belief embedded itself deep in my consciousness. And what I ended up realizing is that I was doing a lot of busy work. I was
Mm.
working
Yeah.
I was just like logging, dude. I remember I was running barbell shrugged. We were making plenty of money. And I don't know how many hours I wasted at my laptop rechecking my email, checking on
Yeah.
stats. Uh, just like I could have worked like a quarter of what I actually worked and been more effective and enjoyed myself. I would have made more money, but this constant pressure I was putting on everything and this expectation I had because and I couldn't stop working because if I stopped working, I wouldn't be a good person. No matter how much money was in the bank, no matter how many people I helped, it wouldn't matter. And so I find a lot of people that come from blue collar backgrounds have this pattern, and I don't find it so much. I get some clients occasionally that whose parents came from like they had a great relationship to money and work, and they don't have that shit. You know, it's like wow, you're really successful really easily, and it's funny because you know some people might call that privilege, and sure they had like situational privilege in that they grew up in an environment. They had parents that taught them great lessons in regard to this specific aspect of life. I didn't grow up with that. And most people don't grow up with that. So, um, yeah, hard work can be a trap, and so we got to be careful of that. And the last thing I can say about hard work is the type of work, kind of like we were talking about with patterns and or with structure and flow. The um, there's like this co- hierarchy of compensation
Mm.
is what I call it. So in this hierarchy of compensation, we all start, well, most of us start at this. We trade money for hours for time.
No, yeah, this is a great topic. I want to. I'm glad we're talking about this because this
Perfect.
is something I've been working on myself, and I've been actually able to switch over just recently. I'm starting to step into that, but yes, I can relate to this. I just wanted to add
Perfect. Perfect. We can have a great
that
conversation then. Um,
in.
so like the first level is is, dollars for time. And, when I was bagging groceries and pushing carts and, roofing houses, it was all unskilled labor, and I needed to go through that phase. Then you accumulate a skill, and now you're exchanging a skill for money. Um, Maybe someone learns how to be a photographer. I learned IT. I learned
Mm.
IT stuff. So I was still getting paid hourly, but like I got paid way better hourly, and I had options. Like I could take that skill and do all sorts of stuff. And it was more pay, and it was easier. It was a lower effort to make more money, right? And then I graduated from that into managing people with skills.
Yeah.
So then that's a skill set in itself, is managing people's skills, which, it's so funny. Like being a business owner, it's kind of hard. It can be hard to listen to people who work in corporate environments who they're like, my boss doesn't do shit, like those lazy bastards in the the executives, they don't do anything, and like they just see them playing golf or whatever. And I'm like, and I know because I'm in the position of managing people, and I have been for a long time, is I'm getting paid to manage people, and managing people is way harder than just being told what to do and use your skill to get paid a certain amount of money. And it's harder, and but it doesn't require as many hours. Again, like the effort
Right.
can be high for short periods of time, and there's an emotional component that comes when you start managing people. And so I think a
Yes.
lot of times people judge, like they'll stay in the dollar for hour or the skill exchange for money because they actually judge people who don't,
Oh,
work, quote unquote, work for a living because they're the managers.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So
Yeah.
most people just stay where they're at because they're not willing to go there because they have a belief about it. And then graduating from that, or sometimes you don't necessarily graduate and like leave it behind. There's skills that I'm the only one that's skilled enough to run, a great podcast in my company. Like I've had other people do it, but it's just not as good. Um, and I'm managing people who have skills, and then I'm also getting paid to think. So when you
Mm.
when you get when you move beyond managing people, now you're getting paid to think. You're creating the strategy and all these
Oh,
things. So I
right.
do both. My primary job is thinking, and my skill is creating content. And then I'm also managing a team. So I'm really doing 3 jobs, but none of them actually feel that hard or difficult compared to like roofing houses.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So
Yeah.
and then the last one is after you get paid to think, then you get paid to be.
Mm,
And that's where a lot
that's
of
one I
people
love right there.
wanna be, you know? So,
Yeah.
my buddy loves, using this analogy of someone who gets paid to be is, Kim Kardashian,
That's a good
like,
one.
dude,
Yeah.
she doesn't really have to do anything other than be, you
Yeah.
know? And she's got all sorts of deals, like, a tweet cost $40,000 last time I checked. It's probably more
Wow.
now. I think that was, like, 5 years ago. So that's like,
Wow.
like,
Yeah.
so the problem is, I think a lot of people see someone who's in a further stage,
Yeah.
and they're either judging them as being lazy,
Yeah.
or and which keeps them from being able to move there themselves, or they think they should jump straight to that thing. It's
Right.
well, here's the thing: is Kim Kardashian may not have moved through that entire series, but her parents did.
Right.
Like
Right.
like this is not everything that everyone has is because of what they've done. It could be generational. It's what their family has done. So if you're like me, you know, your family's pretty damn simple. The I love them, but I didn't get like the Donald Trump kickstart, like it's you're starting with where you're at, and you got to go with the best you can, and also realize that your belief structures are usually the things that are keeping you from moving to that next level, not necessarily an amount of knowledge, or a lot of times that knowledge needs to come, but the belief has to come first so that you can actually that belief has to be in place so you can obtain the knowledge to be able to do that thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm the first person in my family since my great grandfather to be an entrepreneur. So I'm one of the first to break out of that, out of the working for other people. And yeah, what I've learned too, just like you're saying, Mike, is that it creates conflict within if you have a belief of or judgment of other people doing what you want to do, and what is your, well, my question would be like, what is your advice with that? How people can make that leap to, would it be to work on their beliefs and their judgment around that, the resistance around what they have, around the people that they're seeing that are doing the things that they want to do or being the way they want to be?
Oh man, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, well, that's probably gonna be, some work on yourself, right? Lots of years of work on yourself in
That is
some
a lot of work on
respects, but
yourself.
yeah.
The 2 things that have caused the most deep personal development work for me has been entrepreneurship and my romantic relationships
Oh,
have
yeah.
been, like, the 2 things that have caused the most. And, romantic relationships can be hard because it's so easy to project. Uh, is it me or
Yeah.
is it them? I don't know, like, but in business, like, it's you. Like, if you're in charge of the business, like,
Yeah.
you can't it's actually an easier tool for development because, yeah, you just assume everything's your fault. Uh,
It's a good
and
reflection, a good mirror, right?
well, yeah, if like somebody's screwing up on my team, I'm like, man, I didn't fire them quick enough. Or, I should have, like, I'm not monitoring what's happening, or I didn't put the right person in place to monitor that person and make sure, right? So, like,
Yeah.
there's always something I could have done to to avoid the situation. But people who are in entrepreneurial roles, um, who want to be able to go through that hierarchy and build themselves up, and someone who's really good at it, to me, it always starts with a vision of the future, like fast forward 10 years. And I like to say, plan in decades, execute in seconds.
Mm.
Most people never most people don't do either one of those things. They never think further ahead than maybe a year or 2, if they can even do that. I mean, most people are thinking about can't even think about tomorrow, let alone 10 years from now. But, I was talking to a guy who's a billionaire, and he's like, "Ordinary people think in years, extraordinary people think in decades." And I go, "Oh, all right." My mantra is, "I plan in decades and execute in seconds." And so they don't plan decades, and people also procrastinate. They're afraid of the result they're gonna get from doing something new. It's uncertain, so they put it off.
Mm.
And they don't know that that's why they're putting it off. They just think that they may think that they're lazy. They may, I'm just a procrastinator. It's like, no, you're letting fear rule you.
Yes.
And so, um, my job is to know that I have a vision of the future that I see for myself, my family, my company, and I'm moving towards it. I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on it. I have check-ins every quarter, and then um, I and then I just practice like implementing. I don't open my email and skip emails. Like I didn't real I used to do that, and after coaching a lot of people, I realized they do the same thing. Oh, I don't want to deal with that one yet. I'll just read it, and then I'll get to it later. And then it's in there for 3 days, and because it's causing an emotional response that they don't like,
Yes.
and so they just put it off. And so I've trained myself that no matter how uncomfortable the conversation is going to be or the thing I don't want to do, maybe it's a sales thing, or maybe it's a client that's not happy or whatever it is. Like, no, get them on the phone right now. Or it's the first of the month. Do your books from last month, like right
Mhm.
now. Right now, it's happening. There's, it's a priority, and I'm gonna do it. And so I execute in seconds. So when I have that mantra,
Mhm.
I plan in decades and execute in seconds. That says a lot about that person. I mean, imagine the person who does that. That person's gonna
Mhm.
be very squared away, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be really healthy. Their business is gonna be in good, shape. And here's the thing is that vision is gonna change. It's always moving. And so, I think a lot of people don't wanna put a vision in place because 'cause they're afraid they're gonna be stuck with it, and it's gonna be the
Mhm.
wrong one. It's like, "Look, no one ever told you have to follow all the way through with it. Like, this
Right.
is your life. Like, allow it to move and shift. So if you're always tuning into how your desires are shifting and how you're shaping your future, that's a good thing. And then, always just knowing your values, like always checking in with your values is gonna tell you a lot about how you're gonna get to where you're wanting to go.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. And that's why I've switched my coaching over to helping people, guiding them to learn about what their values are, because I don't want to project my values onto them, because that's how you get to where you were when we began this conversation, where you're trying to coach people on your values and your passions, and it's not working. And you're like, what's going on? But when they can connect more with their own values and discover that, then they can own it for themselves and then create the vision that they want to create. Because it's all everybody's going to have a different one. And so, yeah, I like to be what I call lovingly honest. Now, I practice this loving honesty with people because I was so much uncomfortable with conflict before. I didn't want to rock the boat. I wanted to be, make everybody happy. But what I realized when I do that, I'm not being honest with myself. And then I hold all this emotional baggage within that really, um, it creates corruption within the relationship and also within myself. And so I do think it's very important, like you said, to also act accordingly. Like, again, like the same thing you're saying, I feel the same thing. If I let things sit too long without taking action immediately at times, uh it just becomes a heavy burden on me, and so I want to be clear. I don't want to have stuff like that. I'm, holding on to any extra baggage. So I love that you said that, because I can relate to that as well, and that's something that I've also been working on. And as I do that, I clear more way for more opportunity in my life, more connections, more relationships, and that kind of thing. So it really does work, and um, just kind of, and then more about your belief system comes up. Like, is this really true? Well, I was pushing back on the marketing thing for so long because I'm like, this doesn't feel good to me. This feels icky, about some of the marketing strategies out there. And then I decided, you know what? I'm actually, whether I use it or not, I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn a proper structure for it, and I'm going to use it and see how it goes. So it's more like play now. So again, like if you're afraid to create a vision for yourself, it's okay. You can always change it. It's just play, right?
Yeah.
It's not so serious. So that's the way I approach it now myself.
Yeah, I had this conversation with one of my team members about 6 months ago, and, we were putting a marketing strategy in place. He goes, the strategy doesn't feel authentic." I go, "Oh, okay. What about it doesn't feel authentic?" And he couldn't put his finger on it. I was like, "Look, we're simply talking about a structure here. There it can't be authentic or not. Like, it's just a structure. Like,
Yeah.
you can't judge the structure. Now the contents of that marketing, now that could be inauthentic, and we hadn't even gotten to, the content yet. It
Right.
was interesting how somebody, we all do this, start judging something because somebody else used that strategy or that structure with, with terrible content, and now we judge the entire structure for someone else's terrible use of it. I go, "Well, I could use that same exact structure. I can communicate authentically and also end up helping a lot of people because the structure works. And so I think that's something that most coaches could really learn is that it's not the structure of marketing that you don't like. It's you've had some experience in the past that stood out as a time that was inauthentic, and then you threw the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that makes so much sense, and that's what I'm learning too is that, yeah, if you once you learn the structure, then you can do whatever you want to. The creativity is within that, in the content, and that's what is authentic to you, and that's what you express to other people, and that's how they come to you, but you've gotta create the structure so they can find you first, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually like to study assholes. I like in the
Tell me more, please.
in the not metaphorical assholes. Uh The, well, there's these guys out there in the marketing world that are just it's just cringeworthy, right? It's
Oh,
just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Oh, cringe," like, people judge, certain people. I used to judge a lot of these guys, and then I'm like, "You know what? Every person I've ever met has got some gold in them, and there's a reason that guy's pulling down 9 figures." Like,
Right.
it's, uh he's got something. So I study some marketers that other people just refuse to touch. Because I'm looking at their structure. Like, I'm going through a guy's, like, 30-day
Alright.
challenge right now, copywriting challenge, and, the structure is great. Now the examples he uses, like, because he's using examples of his work, I'm just like, "Oh my god," but the structure that he has works really well. It's helped, increase my creativity. It's helped
Wow.
me, the stuff that I'm writing is great. Like, people coaches should be reading it and go, "Oh, I resonate with that." Like, that makes so much sense. That feels good. They would never know that I got the structure from some dude that would make them, like, cringe.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that you're doing that too because you're really open um to the possibility of that working for you, instead of just saying, "Oh, that guy's terrible. He's cringy, so I'm not gonna even bother,"
Yeah,
but
I'm
he
like the
had some
bridge
value for you.
between the
Yeah.
worlds.
You're like going into the shadow aspect of the marketing world, right?
Yeah, yeah, I've
I think
been
that's
there.
great. Oh,
Yeah,
that's great. You got to do that though if you're going to teach people that, right?
yeah, you gotta know all of it. Like, you can't, you know
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you
It's
gotta do
all
the dirty work.
essential. It's
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Oh my gosh, that's so true. Um, yeah. So, I think also, of course, we've hit upon like creating and holding a vision and what goes into that as well. And um, you know, uh I would really love to get into the aspect of personal responsibility around this because that seems to be a big one for people. It seems so basic, but really it's one of the most important lessons I feel like I've learned in my life. And taking personal responsibility for everything really is, getting in out of a victimhood mode where you're blaming other people for where you're at, much like holding beliefs around people and judgment in places that you want to be that I think it kind of in a way takes people off the hook for really taking it to the next level of being seen and heard and really um opening themselves up to more. So personal responsibilities being, oh, I did that. That's me, so let me take personal responsibility for that projection right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, in that context, personal responsibility is interesting 'cause, um, I see this in the spiritual community a lot.
Oh,
I
yeah.
I wouldn't really, like, say that I'm in it. I kinda, like, walk around the outskirts of it and poke my head in, see what they're up to, and then I kinda go off, do my own thing. But, the, I used to do this, is, like, this personal responsibility thing is a great lesson to learn, but it can go too far. Like, the pendulum can swing, you're like, "Oh, everybody's a reflection of me, and whatever shit is going on, whatever I judge them for, that's my shit." And you know what? I think it's good to go through a period of time where you act like that because you don't know. you have
Right.
no idea what's your shit and what's not. So it's really good to go through a period of time, which I did, of like, wow, it's all my shit. And so it's just put me through the dark night of the soul several times over, lots of journaling, working through stuff. And after a few years of that, I was like, man, I worked through that. Like I really worked through that. And this person in my life is doing this thing. It's not me. That's
Mhm.
them. And like the place in which I take personal responsibility is how am I going to create boundaries with this person?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so instead of like because the former creates a situation where people are walking all over you, your boundaries are getting crossed, and like you're pissed off all the time. Um, and so yeah, there came a point for me with the personal responsibility. It's like, oh, my responsibility is to stop talking to this person. My
Exactly.
responsibility is like I don't belong in this relationship anymore. That's the responsibility I need to take. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just like to point that out because, yeah, I think that's a thing that happens and with people who get introduced to personal responsibility, who take it very seriously, which it's a great thing to take seriously, but to watch out for that one pitfall.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up too, because that is very important. And you're right. People do take it a little bit too far. And that's where I think a higher level of discernment comes in when you start working with that, and realizing that, yeah, there's some relationships that I need to kindly step out of here because, it's not serving either person here. And yeah, and you have like that's part of it, in my opinion, personal responsibility is like I have a choice in how I'd like to, you know, um, express that and that goes with your vision too. It's like if you keep kind of getting pulled through in a direction, you're actually not taking personal responsibility if you're just letting people pull you through in a certain direction instead of taking the reins yourself and using discernment around that, what the people you want to be around, and um all of those things, like yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the vision piece is if you're not holding a vision for yourself, you'll be you'll be entering someone else's pattern. So
exactly.
whether they have a
Yeah.
vision or not, like you have your patterns and you have the patterns of others, and then the people who are ruling the world are really good at getting other people to adopt their pattern. Their which is informed by like the best leaders, they have a vision and then they get really good at communicating it, which means they're creating a pattern with their language to to hypnotize people. And they're like, "Oh
Mhm.
yeah, that seems like a good idea. We'll do that." And then next thing you know, you're like, "How did we get here?" I think we've all done that. It's like, wake up one day, it's like, "How the did I get in this position? Why have I been working this job? Or why am I still with this client?" Or like,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And I ask people to have a lot of grace for themselves because here's the thing is you were never taught how to create and hold a vision. Uh,
Yes.
you know,
That's true.
your parents had you till you were like 5 or 6, then you went to school. You were told you've been told the majority of your life where to be, how to be, and what to be, like and then but then they'll say shit to kids like, "You can be whatever you want," but it's inside of this context of we're controlling your entire life right now. The kid has no idea how to create a vision of the future. They're not being taught,
Right.
and they're being taught by people who primarily have been repeating the same pattern for especially if they're a school teacher. And, nothing against school teachers, but, like, most of them went from parents to school to teaching in school. Like, what do they know about the world? I'm not confident they know too much. I don't know. Uh, were you a school teacher? I don't know, but,
Well, yeah, I mean, you kind of it's confusing. There's a confusing messages as a child when you're saying, "Oh yeah, you can be whatever you want, do whatever the sky's the limit," but you got to do things this way,
yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, we have no practice. So, you may have practice reading, you may have practice writing, arithmetic, practice whatever it is that you're skilled at. You might be practiced at coaching, but you're not practiced at creating a vision and holding it and creating a structure around your life in order to take you there. And so, the first time you do it, I have clients that, I say, we're going to create a 90-day plan that revolves around your 10-year vision. And the first time you do it, it's gonna be screwed up. You're gonna put stuff in there that you think needs to get done, and then halfway through, you're gonna realize it's not, and you like want to change it, and that's okay. And like, the first, half dozen times you create a night, it's gonna get better and better every time, but it's gonna take you a while. I've been doing this for over a decade. I'm pretty good at knowing what needs to get done in the next 90 days, but you don't in the beginning. And I've got one client, he's 47, and halfway through his 90 days, he was like, "Oh, I don't know if this is working for me." I'm like, "Dude, this is totally working for you. This is what's happening is exactly the fact that 1 month into your 90-day plan, you realize that you put the wrong things down doesn't mean it didn't work for you. It means it's working for you great. And now we
Yeah.
get to change it and refine it and all this." And so he's 47 and he's learning, "Oh, this is how I hold a vision of the future, and I have discipline and structure to get there."
I love that. I love that so much. It's bringing that play aspect into it again because, I think we take life so seriously as adults. We forget that when we were kids, we tried everything. We played, we acted like, we played office, we played we with the kitchen, and cooked and all these things. And you can still do that as an adult. As you are building your vision, because it has to be coming from a very creative place, which is all about play and making mistakes and so-called mistakes. I don't really call them mistakes anymore, but yeah, that's what I learned too, because I had been a gymnast for so many years and had been in this like very structured environment, being told what to do, being judged literally. And it was just so, I think when I became an adult, it became hard to break out of that because I did not know what to do. I didn't know how to be creative or to hold a vision, and as I've gotten older over the years, I've learned more how to do that and teach other people. But it does take some opening up into your right brain more, and like you said in the earlier in the show, finding that flow between the structure part and the play part, the flow. So opening and being open to receive the next thing that you want to create. Yeah,
Yeah, play is huge.
yeah,
Play is huge. It's the first way we learn.
yes,
We
exactly.
learn through
Yeah.
play. It's hard to learn any other way. Like, human beings are
Yeah,
designed that you watch little kids, that's how they're learning, is they're playing. And then we take them out of play, and then learning gets hard all of a sudden.
I know. It gets
Yeah,
boring. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. I would love for you just to leave everybody with what you're offering currently, again, where to find you, and anything else you'd like to add.
Sure. I have a summit, all inclusive retreat happening in the middle of September, September 16th through 18, for coaches. I'm bringing in some really great business minds that are also coaches, and we're going to be breaking down all the different aspects of what it takes to build up a business, and we're going to have a good time doing it. I rented out a summer camp and bringing
Nice.
in paleo chefs. It's gonna be a great time. So if you want to check that out, you can hit me up, Mike_Bledsoe on Instagram, and my website is thestrongcoach.com.
Wonderful. That sounds amazing. Thank you, Mike. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for
yeah,
coming on.
my pleasure.